exciting. You're in for an exciting 6 weeks. Let's start with that. We'll start with one of the coldest days of the year. Well, everybody's staying warm out there. Um, we get lots of interesting weather throughout all the years that I've hosted this course, and lots of stories about driving, trying to get to Rutland or driving through a blizzard to Craftsbury. So winter's a great time to host these meetings because people generally have a little more time in the winter, but it also can be really challenging because of the weather. And now, with the strong movement to kind of virtual options, especially during COVID and after, we are able to kind of streamline these classes a little bit, because we're able to have a virtual option for folks, especially if you can't make it in a day, or can't make it at all. And it also allows us to kind of hold all the courses on one day, which is great. So, my job today is to give you an introduction to the class or to the course and talk about nutrient management a little bit. What we will be, we can hear good. Um, give you an introduction to the class, kind of walk through what we're going to be covering, the information that you need, what you'll be producing. And then we'll start with an introductory lecture on some of the plan requirements, and why we're doing this in the first place. So, with that, I'm going to get started. We'll jump right into it. Um, just to reiterate, this is a 6 week course. I know everybody has been primed for that, so that's probably not a surprise. And it's important to come to class each week, whether it's virtual, or you're showing up at a location. But each week builds on the other, and each week there's homework to do. You probably haven't maybe had to do homework for a while, but it is a necessary part of developing a nutrient management plan in this program. So you'll come into class, you'll learn about um, what you need to do over the week. So, what part of the plan you need to develop. And then you'll likely have to go home and do some homework and then come back the next week, learn about the next part, so on and so forth. So, it's really important to show up each week. It's really important to complete the homework in between classes. And that way, at the end of 6 weeks in class 6, we're wrapping up the planning process. And if you've done all your work, you'll have a completed nutrient management plan. There's plenty of help. There's additional help outside of class. Generally, there's more people helping with the course than there are taking the class. So there's no reason to fall behind. And I just want to reiterate how important it is to not fall behind, and to get the plan finished in this 6 week period. I say that because we're still trying to finish plans from last year that were not finished during that 6 weeks. So, once we stop meeting every week, life goes on, people get busy, and it gets really hard to wrap up a plan. So just stick with it, take all the help that is around to help you, and complete the plan over this 6 week period. So again, lots of help here in class time. Most people are willing to stay later and help out. You may even be able to finish your homework in class, but the goal is to learn, complete the assignments, and finish the plan in 6 weeks. All right. So if you miss a class and you want to listen to the lecture, learn what has to happen, it's located on our website. I put the web address up above, but you can get that from other people in the class if you're sitting in a room right now. There's lots of other resources online to help. Last year's classes are recorded too. So again, go to the website if you need help. This year's class links are on the website as well, and the dates of the classes. If you know you're going to miss one now, please let the folks in your classroom know so that we can make sure that we're able to help you if you're not going to be around. Okay, so everyone should have received a binder. White binder looks like this. Doesn't look like much, but this binder will become your nutrient management plan at the end of 6 weeks. Okay, so inside the binder, there's a bunch of material. Hopefully you have time to look through it and see everything that's in there. The materials in the binder, some of them are requirements. Some of them are kind of filler, just showing you what goes behind each tab. But please don't remove anything out of the binder permanently unless someone that's working with you, an assistant, tells you that that's okay. We don't need that. You can get rid of it. Okay. So there's a lot of components in the binder, a lot of pieces of paper in there. And you're going to put a lot more pieces of paper in there to complete the NMP. In the NMP, there's the agenda for the class. It goes through each class and what we'll be covering. It also tells you what the reading material is. The reading material is helpful. It's in this book, Digging Deeper, which is in the binder. And the course book essentially follows the class week by week. So it's great to read ahead, read about what you're going to be doing, what we're going to be learning. Then we'll learn it. So you'll be kind of seeing it twice. And then if you need to review or you can't quite remember, you can always go back to the course book. I remember one year in the survey, somebody said the course book wasn't that exciting or unique. It just covered what we already covered in class. Well, that's the point, that you have a resource to go back to. So the Digging In manual is the course book for the class. It's in the binder. And again, the agenda outlines what the homework is, what you should be reading in the course book each week. Okay. So besides the agenda should be in the front of the binder, it also tells you what's in the binder. There's a couple of sheets that tells you what is behind each tab in the binder. You can see there's a whole bunch of tabs, farm summary, manure production, etc. And there's a list that says, this is what it should go behind the manure production tab. Okay, so you'll be putting those pieces into the binder or they're already there. Okay, so when you actually finish up writing your plan, you're going to print it out and you're going to put it behind the tabs. And so that sheet tells you where each piece goes. Okay. All right. So the agenda and what's in the binder are found right in the front of the book. We will be using a program, a computer-based program. It's actually a web application called GoCrop. GoCrop is a product of the University of Vermont. And we've been using GoCrop for over a decade now to help farmers write their own nutrient management plans. So that is the platform that we'll be using to actually construct the plan. Then you will print out the pieces of the plan from GoCrop, and then those will go into the physical binder that you have. And the binder itself is the completed nutrient management plan. Just so folks understand, the binder, a hard copy of the plan, needs to be kept at the farm at all times. Okay, so that is a requirement for most farms in the state of Vermont. So if you're being inspected by the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, and they come out and say, can I see your nutrient management plan? You really can't say to them, oh, it's in GoCrop. And people say that a lot. It is, parts of it are in GoCrop, but the plan in its entirety is in that binder. So you need to keep that binder in a place that you can find if somebody wants to see it. Okay, so it is important to have that physical copy on the phone. Besides that report from the reports from GoCrop, inside the binder, you will also need to put your physical soil tests. So copies of each soil test that you have from the farm. You'll also need to put your manure test or tests. You'll need a set of maps that we'll talk about towards the end of class today. I put that you'll need soil fact sheets. Those physical fact sheets are no longer a requirement in the binder, but depending on who you're working with, you may or may not receive those. You'll also need Russell 2 numbers or predicted soil loss for your farm. We'll talk about that later today too. And then you'll need some other important documents. The other important documents are already in the binder. Okay, so that's why I said you don't necessarily want to be taking things out of the binder that don't look important to you, because there's actually a number of documents in the binder that need to stay in there to meet the requirement of the plan. Okay, so you have your binder. You need to bring your binder each week to class. Or if you're attending online, make sure that you have it with you. We will be using it. You will need information in it. You will need to put information into it. So make sure that you have it accessible. Hopefully you've already put your soil tests in there, manure tests, maps, Russell 2 numbers. Hopefully a lot of that stuff has already been put into your binder by yourself or conservation district person you're working with or extension, so that it's available for you as you build your plan. Okay, so you have the textbook in the binder, you have all the paper in the binder. There's a couple other pieces that you'll need, a couple other resources that are in there, such as the nutrient recommendations for field crops, which is a booklet that should be in there, and the 590 nutrient management standard. It's kind of blurry when I do that, so you can't really see what I'm showing you, but the standard that we follow to write your plan and is required by state and federal governments is in your binder. Okay, so all these things are requirements, they need to be in there, but they'll also be used as you build your NMP. Okay. All right, so with that, what we're going to do at this point is actually introduce you to GoCrop. So again, GoCrop is the platform that we will use to write the majority of your plan. It's a web-based application, so you don't have to go to the store and buy something or receive something from us to install on your computer. You'll actually access the program through the web. I want to be clear that all of your data that you put into GoCrop is safe and secure, and it's only accessible by you. So even though this is a university owned program, the information that you enter for your farm is only available to you. All the information is stored on a server that's housed outside of the university. It's actually a private, we call it a server farm or a data farm that hosts all the GoCrop information. So again, we can't access it. No one else can access it but you, which is why it's really important to remember your login and password information, because generally we don't have it unless you've given it to us. So again, it's your data. It's something only you have access to unless you give someone else access. Now, with that, I'm going to turn over the next bit of our program to Lindsay Rule, who is our GoCrop expert, and she'll be walking you through what we'll be doing into GoCrop today, a brief introduction to it. And then we'll get back to kind of more of the lecture portion of the class. So Lindsay, I'm not sure if you're ready, but.
That's why I grabbed this, so I would remember, but then I forgot. Sorry, we're just talking about tech stuff over here. Past Lindsay forgot to help future Lindsay out, but we're here now. You guys can hear us okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, wait, hold on. I can't hear you. Let's try this again. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, I'm Lindsay. I'm here in the NRCD office, which apparently is party themed. So fun.
Just so you know, Lindsay,
folks.
your internet is going in and out. I don't think your signal is that strong, so hopefully it'll be okay.
Okay, I'll talk really slowly, so hopefully it'll all come together. All right, I'm gonna share my screen here, and feel free to interrupt me if it's not coming through. All right, so this is GoCrop. To access GoCrop, you'll go to www.gocrop.com. And sorry, I just need to do. And then from here, hopefully you have already created your account. You're going to click sign in. If you have not created your account, you need to sign up, create your GoCrop account and add your farm. And you want some help with that, feel free to connect with me after the lesson today, so around noon or later if you that time doesn't work for you. And just a quick note on that, we are a little bit in a transition phase of GoCrop, so you can see that we have the old version of GoCrop, like the aesthetically looking piece of that here, V3. And then when we sign in, we'll end up going to the V4. But in the interim, again, you're going to sign up for a GoCrop account and create your farm account in the old looking version. So I'm going to go to sign in. And I've already logged in, so GoCrop has saved that for me, but otherwise you will have, I'll show you what this looks like. So this is going to be your sign-in page. So you'll put your email address in here and your password. And please feel comfortable. I know Heather said your data is private, and it absolutely is, but it's also really helpful if you don't mind writing down your login name and your password and keeping it in your binder. If you feel doubly comfortable, please share that with someone at Extension or someone in your office. It's not, ideally, right, you're updating your plan every year and you're using GoCrop throughout the season to input your records. But there are some times when there are some folks who only go into GoCrop once every 5 years. And by the time they come to us, they say, I don't remember my email address. I don't remember my password. And we say, is it in your binder? It's there. Sometimes it's not in their binder, but if we did our work now and you feel comfortable, maybe we have it on file and we can share that with you at that time when you're ready, just kind of streamline the process. So sign-in page, still the V3 look, email, password. If you're using your home or personal computer, you can do Remember Me. If not, if you're using like a laptop or a desktop from somebody who's assisting you, you probably don't want to click Remember Me. So log in. And now we are in the V4, slightly different look. I'm just going to kind of take a little bit of time to orient us to what it looks like. And just like in the V3 version, we're in V4 now, but in the V3 version, we still have the side menu. You can at any time go back to Classic, but for the purposes of folks who are just coming into using GoCrop, please stick with V4, the new GoCrop. There's no sense to learn both layouts, so just stick with the one. And then this is a little bit in a darker green. We're in the all farms category of these 3 pieces. And we can see that because our farm is listed here. Occasionally someone might have more than 1 farm, but typically it's just 1. And you can manage your account from here, do a hard log out, and that type of stuff. But we want to go into our planning section. So we have our farm here. We're going to click the row. I've already started a plan, so my row is showing up right here. But for folks who haven't, you're gonna have to click start a plan, and then you'll get this row and walk through some other steps. And just to have a brief look at what that looks like, you're basically gonna have this window pop up. Make sure Vermont NMP reports is clicked. I'm not gonna go into advanced right now because we're not advanced right now. We can get into that later, but right now this is all you need to do. Click save. Start your plan, and you'll be at this row right here. You'll click your annual plan. And now I'm going to take a moment to reorient us to this page before diving into what we'd like to accomplish today. And just to start with the side menus again, right? We have our last 3 options that we did previously, and then we have these additional 3 pieces. So we're in the planning section, in a little bit of a darker green. We can also access records and farm assets, and we'll get to those later in the class. And if at any time, if you're working on maybe a screen that's a little bit smaller and you want to see more, you can always just minimize the side menu by pressing the little caret or Pac-Man, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to keep it open just so we can see those options. But when it is tiny, all of those sidebar menu options become these little icons. And if you hover over them, it'll tell you what they are: planning, records, farm assets, and so on. And when we look here, we can see a couple of our other options, other things that have shown here. Our plan status, we can always lock our plan. If you lock your plan, you're not going to be able to make any changes because it's locked. So keep it active, keep it open while we're planning through it. It's good form that when you're done planning to lock it, but we're just starting. We're not finished, so we're going to leave it as it is, as active. And then our plan settings, this is what you would have marked when you first created your plan, what you're naming it, 2025 annual plan, and that Vermont NMP reports is clicked. And then we have, right now, we're labeled our 2025 annual plan. As you have more plans, they will be labeled with different years. And we have these 2 submenus, the dashboard and reports. And we are going to be primarily working the dashboard for the first number of weeks. When you finish your plan, you'll be able to access your reports here, but it's all from planning. Now when we're first starting our plan, we have these 2 buttons: edit plan, start planning. And said this last week in a tutorial, but this is the only time we get to press the start planning button. You can always edit, but I'm going to press start planning because it will never come up again until next year when I start a new plan. Very exciting. All right. So now when we've started planning, we can see there's a little bit of an instruction set right here. And again, we have our edit settings here. And just to orient us, at any time, we can go back to the dashboard where we just were by clicking back to dashboard. And you can also navigate just like you would in any other browser using forward or backwards buttons on the left. Well, in Chrome, it's on the left. And while I'm mentioning Chrome, this is not a placement ad. This is just the way things have happened, that GoCrop is best supported in Chrome. So please use that as your browser. Firefox, okay. If you can, please avoid Edge. It just isn't as well supported in Edge as it is in Chrome. So please use the Chrome browser if you're able to. And then you can see that we have this walkthrough wizard, or I said walkthrough wizard. Sometimes we call it a walkthrough, sometimes we call it a wizard. I'm calling it a walkthrough wizard now on the left-hand side. And kind of how this is displayed is that you kind of walk through these steps and you kind of see them in this diamond shape. And in some areas, you have to do one step before you can get on to the next. So we're in getting started. We can't get to our plan narrative until we've gotten through our getting started, which again is just this text right here. And then we can't, for example, enter any nutrient analyses until we've entered nutrient sources. Equipment stands alone. You can come and do that anytime. And we can't fill out any of our field information until we at least put our field names in down here. And then we can kind of bounce around through these steps once they're unlocked. which is fun if you want to think about GoCrop like a video game. We get to level up and unlock the next steps when once we put some of our information in. So here we are doing that stuff. So getting started, we talked about the instructions right here, and now I'm going to click the getting started so we can move on to the plan narrative. When we first get to the plan narrative, we can see all our sub-steps, planner details, farm, manure, and so forth. And as we go through them, they will start to display below. I am used to working on my desktop screen, and this feels kind of tiny. So I am going to actually expand my screen. This is something you can do too if you want, by pressing this left caret button to make this smaller and go away. And then I'm also going to hide my walkthrough steps just to be able to see more of my screen by clicking this hide sidebar menu here. So we have a full page of just what I'm working on right now. And at any time I can bring those back by going back and clicking these pieces again. So you can skip around and do any of these in any order, but it's, I think, easiest to think about it in terms of going through them in the order they're displayed. So we're gonna start with planner details. And this, you're going to enter some of the same information you've been entering, your farm name, who the manager is, and etc. And I think the other thing before I start entering this stuff in that I want to show you is that next to a lot of the forms, GoCrop has some hint text. And to access the hint text, you click this little question mark with the circle. So I'm just going to open all those up as we go through, as we describe these. So you're gonna put your farm name in, the manager name, and the manager name may be the same name as the account, but you might have somebody managing the account that's different than the manager, it's often the same. And then this planning assistant. So the planning assistant is going to be probably someone who's sitting next to you. It might be extension staff, VACD staff, NRCD staff. And this is primarily to help us know who's helping you so that, you know, sometimes years later, we might come back and think, oh, we need to update a Russell, but we don't know who did it. But with this information, now we can at least locate the office who might have that information on file. So it helps streamline the process to update plans and go through the process. So in this example, I'm going to use Kate Wettergreen again. Did you know that you were part of my last one?
I went to your training.
Great, thank you. The affiliation and then the contact information. I'm gonna put my contact information because I don't know yours off the top of my head. And you can continue to add other folks as you see fit. One is enough, but if you're like really working with two people, that's great. Heather will sign off on your plan if you're going through that program. So her information and her assistance and her sign off is going to be documented elsewhere. You don't necessarily need to put that there, but you can always add another. If you add that, you can also get rid of it. All right, I'm going to save that. And now we have this little check button. We've done it, video game style. Move on to the next one. And every little circle we see that is unfilled means we haven't started it. If you leave something partially done, it'll have like a little partially filled in icon. And so it's a nice way to help you keep track of what you've done and what has yet to be done. While I'm talking about that, GoCrop checks for completeness. It checks for doneness. It does not check for correctness, right? Like I put Kate's name in, my contact information, GoCrop's like, cool, you're ready to go. So just make sure that when you are entering information that it is correct, because GoCrop doesn't know. It's just making sure that that field or form is filled in. So now we're going to fill out some farm information. And this is the farm narrative. When you fill out these forms or this text for the narration pieces, you can write incomplete sentences. That's kind of nice, but also all the prompts like describe your farm and plans for the future are there in the report. So you can put something as simple as like 350 cows, conventional, corn and hay. There is additional prompts here that GoCrops gives you, like talking about the size of your farm, what you grow, what management practices you like to use. And this is also encapsulated further in some of the other prompts for the narrative as well. So this is a really great space for the producer to think about how they want to describe their farm, in particular for an inspection. I'm going to put in some text here. I think one of the key pieces that is really helpful when either you're when this is being looked at by an inspector, or if you're working with somebody consistently to help update your plan, it's really helpful to know what your future plans are as well. I think this is what this question is kind of getting at more so. So it might be like, we do not plan to make any changes to our herd size or our land base. You might also say something, we would like to incorporate more cover crops. And in this plan, because ideally you're updating this every year, is just for the next year. And you might say something a little bit different, like, we hope to expand our herd size, we might reduce our cows, like, you know, whatever you think you might be doing for the next year is a good place to put this. This next section is describe your typical crop rotation, and that could be, you know, we have continuous corn, permanent hay, and rotate hay and corn. You can get a little bit more detailed by saying, like, approximately 30% of our acres are in corn, 40% are permanent hay, and we rotate the rest between the two. And perhaps you're not growing any of these crops, and it's all annual vegetable production. So feel free to describe your crop rotation in whatever way makes the most sense for your farm. And then for determining yields, goals, estimates, what we really want to know is, how do you know how much any single one of your fields are producing? And ideally, what you'd write is something like, we know the average weight of a load or bale and count the number coming from each field. You haven't been keeping records. Another way to start thinking about what your fields can produce is by looking at the soil series fact sheets, because they have their a section where it talks about or writes what is typical for that soil type. So that's what we're looking for there in that section, and we'll click save. And now we've completed that one. And as we continue going through each one of these different sections, they start to display below. And at any time, we can edit using the pencil button in each of these boxes, or by clicking the row like we did before. So we'll just keep going through to the manure section, and we'll look at the drop-down menu. So when do we apply manure? We have these three options. If you apply manure in spring and fall and not summer, I think your best bet at this point is just to click spring, summer, and fall, have all your bases covered. But in general, we'll pick something from this drop-down menu, and then choose again from this next question, how long before you incorporate drop-down menu. And this can get a little bit tricky, right? Because maybe with your corn land, you use an injector and it's all immediate, and on your hay land, you're broadcasting and not incorporating. So which one is it? Is it immediate, or is it not incorporated? I think to answer this for this year, think about, well, is the majority of your land in corn? And if that's so, maybe it's immediate, or maybe you want to split the difference and put an average. You get to choose, because below we can describe that a little bit more when we're describing our manure management systems. So because I'm filling this out, I'm thinking along those tracks of when I apply, but we have the subtext to help us think more about our manure management systems, to help us fill this out a little bit more. So one of the questions is, what kind of manure does your farm produce? How do you store it? So I might say, I have my lactating cow, and wastewater goes to a pit. Heifer waste is in a stack. We export some heifer waste, and then say corn land is injected, and hay land is broadcast. If you do not have a manure sample analysis back for your pit and you're going to use book values, this is a really good place to put that. It's not terribly uncommon that you might not be able to get your manure sample till April, given the circumstances. And so in the meantime, creating your plan, you're using book values. It's good to put that here so that you know that that's what's happening. And as a reminder to yourself to really grab that manure sample, because we need an annual sample of manure for the plan to meet Agency of Agriculture nutrient management plan requirements. So I'm just going to throw the sentence in here if it's helpful for you, but we are using book values and we'll update the plan once we have our manure analysis sample report. Save that. We'll move on to the next one, where we describe the tillage operations. Again, there are drop-down menus. Choose the ones that make the most sense for you. They're pretty extensive, but there is also a no-till option if that is what's going on your farm. And let's say it is no-till, or we leave secondary tillage method blank. But it's also okay to say, you know, we no-till, except when we are rotating from hay to corn or to smooth out fields. To make the sense for your farm and what you're doing most of the time throughout most years. And my tillage is showing up as partial because I didn't choose a secondary tillage method. So I'm going to actually click NA because I really want that check mark. And now we got the check mark right there. I don't know if anybody else online could hear, but I got a really satisfying sigh from this room because of the check mark. And that's how I felt in my heart. So it's really good to have that audibly represented here. All right, we have just a few more to go through here before we finish the narrative. And now I think I'm getting really red. But we're just going to power through. So we're at the shorter part of the narrative, so we'll go through a little bit faster on these. So I got the watershed. We'll put your watershed name. This might be on a map that your LTP has prepared for you, and you're going to choose the watershed where your farm is located. You might have fields in a different watershed. You might have most of your fields in a different watershed than the one that your farm is on, but choose the one that your farm is on. And then you'll put your HUC code in there. And then each watershed, I think it's the EPA that comes out with this list of, you know, if it is impaired, why it's impaired. And it might be something like temperature, agricultural runoff. And then there are some other, stormwater runoff is another option I've seen a lot. So look at that, put those answers in as they apply to you and your farm. Move on to our land base. So GoCrop breaks land into a couple of different categories, and one column is owned and another one is leased. And we have a total here. GoCrop does a lot of really great stuff for us, but one thing it does not do is total up our land. So we will have to add that up. But kind of working backwards here, permanent pasture are fields that are always pasture. You might have some that you hay and some that you pasture, some that you take out, like you might pasture mostly, but you take a few cuts. Pick which category you think it's most applicable and stick with it. What we don't want to do here is double count. So maybe I'm going to have a few acres permanent pasture, a few in permanent hay. And just to stress, permanent hay are fields that have been in hay as long as you can remember pretty much, and more importantly, will be in hay for the foreseeable future. And then this tillable is going to be anything that you have in annual production, like any corn or soy or vegetables, or things that you rotate. So you might be like, yeah, it's in hay now, but I'm going to rotate it later. That still goes into tillable. This example, we'll have 40 there. And then I'll total them up. I got 120. And then whatever acres you lease. And so for this example, we'll put 20 there. And we're not leasing any other types. So click that, save. That, and we're on to our last piece, which is livestock. If you don't have any livestock, you're gonna click this and move on and you're done. But if you do have livestock, you're gonna fill out this form. And you're going to choose your animal from the drop-down menu. And we have a lot of options. And yet if you don't see something in these options that you are raising, click other. And the other piece of this is that you can add a bunch of categories. So what we're really trying to get at here is how many animals you have on site and break those into the categories that make the most sense for you. Some folks are going to be like, I got calves and I got cows, and that's how I'm doing it. That's fine. That's great. As long as it totals the number of cows that are often there. And other folks might say, well, you know, I've got lactating cows and I've got dry cows, and I have all these different stages of heifers. I've got beef cows, got a few pigs. So putting in the categories that make the most sense for your producer going forward. So in this example, I'm gonna lump and not split a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna say I've got dairy cows. This present number really is more like the average number you have at the year. Like, you know, herds can wax and wane, grow and like shrink and swell in their herd size. So just choose the average that you anticipate having throughout this year, 2025, we're planning. And then the maximum number. So like, yeah, on average, I have 120, but my barn can handle 130. The average weight of the animals, average milk production, pounds per day per cow. And then the drop down menu of, are they always confined? So are they always in the barn? And if not, if they have access to some pasture, and you would click no, and then choose a grazing type. I know there's lots of different ways to graze, but GoCrop is really looking at two broad ways: continuous, put your cows out, one big field, and that's what they have access to, versus management intensive, which is there's some paddocks and some rotation. And then the stocking rate of how many cows you have per acre. And I'm going to add one more group, but again, you can add a bunch just to, I feel like if I'm going to have some dairy cows, I'm going to have some younger stock too. Let's throw these numbers in. And if you want that little green check box on your list, you'll have to put 0 milk production in there. Your reports will still generate without that information, but if you leave it blank, it'll look like the form is undone. So it's confined. And now I'm going to save. So I've got my checklist here. Everything's filled out. GoCrop says it's complete, but only I know if it's correct. I have all of the information displayed down here where I can see at a glance what I've written. And if I want to change anything, I can click the pencil button here. So that's everything we've got. If we've entered for our narrative. And also, if you're at this stage, you're like, this looks pretty good, and I never want to see this checklist again, I'm going to click hide. And I said never, and that was really dramatic, but you can always bring it back by clicking show. So we've got our checklist for our narrative. We've done that. I'm going to bring out our side menu. And we can move on to the next step, but I think that's for next week. And so now I'm just going to take one more moment and go back to the dashboard to show you that our checklist is visible and we've got our narrative and farm information done with the check. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Heather. And hopefully I didn't cut out too much.
No, it was great. I don't know. At first it was a little choppy, but that was great. Thanks, Lindsay. All right, so that was an overview of...
Oh no!
There, thanks, Lindsay. All right, well, that was a quick overview of Go Crop, and you can see how we'll be walking through each step of the plan. Your homework this week is to fill out that plan narrative, to navigate your way into Go Crop, start a plan and fill out the plan narrative. And it's pretty limited in what you need to do. So really just a time to start getting comfortable with Go Crop, and really complete the first part of your plan, which is describing your farm. There are folks in your classroom, and Lindsay also will be online throughout the rest of the class, so that if people need help navigating that first part of Go Crop, she'll be available to help out with that as well. So again, filling out that plan narrative is your first homework this week. Hopefully you have time to do that before you even leave class today. All right, so let's get back to um sorry. Okay. So let's get back into nutrient management planning. We already covered Go Crop. So I just wanted to summarize kind of what our goal is here over the next 6 weeks, and talk about nutrient management and what it is. So the goal of nutrient management is to combine your on-farm nutrient sources. For most people, that's probably manure or compost, or crop residues, crop rotations, legumes. So take your on-farm nutrient sources with commercial fertilizers, if you purchase those, to meet the needs of the crop that you're growing while minimizing nutrient losses. Okay, so we're trying to grow high quality, high yielding crops, minimizing nutrient losses to protect the environment, but also to protect our investment, right? If you're adding nutrients, you want them to go into your crops and be utilized to produce yield and quality and not lost to the environment. So it's both for the environment, but also for the bottom line, with resources that you have on your farm first, and then supplementing with other types of fertilizers that generally are purchased from off the farm. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do here over the next 6 weeks. It's complicated. I'm not going to go through all these, but this made it sound easy. A plus B equals C. But really, we're going to be looking at an integrated approach, covering lots of different topics, trying to understand how soil health and managing for soil health will promote more resilient, consistent crop production and productivity. Talk about the different organic amendments that we do have on our farms, such as manure, legumes, and other crop residues, and how those operate in the soil, how they release nutrients, how they're impacted by the biology in the soil. So really dig into soil management more holistically to help you build this plan. Okay, so it's not just looking at soil tests, although that's a big part of it. It's really thinking about your whole system, how you manage those crops, how you manage the soil. So not just the chemical needs of the crop, but the physical and biological needs to help, optimize yields, and protect the environment. So we will be digging into all these topics as deep as we can, given the time that we have together. So why are we doing this? And I know some of you are here maybe because you have to be, you have, regulatory requirement to be here. Some of you may be taking the class because you're trying to receive some funding through NRCS, maybe through the EQIP program. But really, an NMP, developing it, learning about it, and implementing it is really important to your farm overall. And I think most people have nutrient management on their farm, and I hear that a lot. I already do this. Why do I have to take this class? And, this sort of puts all of what you do into a framework, because of regulatory requirements often, or organic requirements. Some of you are certified organic and you have to keep these types of records for those requirements as well. But nutrient management is good farming, and you can benefit economically. Again, you can protect the environment around you, help address some of those concerns, which in turn is good for business, and building public relations. So, there's a lot of reasons to be taking this class, learning everything that we're going to be going through. It can, really be powerful to you. Knowledge is power. When you're communicating with your community, legislators, etc., nutrient management and the knowledge that you have about it can be very powerful and helpful to both your farm and your community. So let's talk a little bit about economics. The amendments that we have on our farm and utilizing those properly, so especially manure nitrogen and manure nutrients, we know can save us money. We know they can save us money because we have fertility on our farm. If we add that and we understand what we're providing to the crop from that nutrient source, then we may or may not have to apply more fertilizer, right? So managing the manure or legume nitrogen or plow down crops, managing those nutrients properly. And some of that is just understanding, what am I getting from it? And what does my soil need? So being able to manage that in a way that feeds the crop and reduces your need to purchase inputs can save the farm quite a bit of money. A lot of the times, we're not always thinking about that. We're looking at the manure as a waste. We need to get it on the ground. We need to get it out. We're not necessarily always thinking about timing, incorporation, proper rates. What does the crop need? What does the soil need? So this will put all those pieces together and hopefully, again, put your nutrients where they need to go, keeping you from purchasing inputs that you may not need. Adding manure it's a real benefit. It's a real resource. And I know oftentimes people that are not farmers look at manure as, as bad, right? It can contaminate the environment. It can get places where we don't want it if it's not managed properly, if it's not applied properly, utilized in the way that it should be used. But myself and you, it has to be looked at as a valuable resource, both to build the quality, biology, and physical properties of the soil, but also to provide valuable nutrients to our crop. Oftentimes I'll say a lot of people are under fertilizing, under manuring fields, and we want to address that in this class. And this slide is simply showing, in 1,000 gallons of manure, we get roughly 5 pounds of nitrogen, 4 pounds of phosphorus, and 15 pounds of potassium. When we look at availability, and when you harvest 1 ton of dry matter, right? So 1,000 gallons of manure, or 1,000 gallons of manure per acre, you're putting on a certain amount of nutrients. But when you harvest feed from your farm, and this is just an example of grass, you're removing a lot of nutrients, right? 50 pounds of nitrogen, on average, 17 pounds of phosphorus, 50 pounds of potassium for every ton of dry matter that you remove from a hayfield. Okay. And so our goal is to make sure that we're putting back what we remove based on what's in the soil. And that's what we're going to help look at in class. So we've done a number of experiments through my program here at UVM, looking at adding manure to fields only, and then adding manure plus fertilizers, and fertilizer that's targeted to be additive to the manure, right? So not just applying fertilizer to apply it, but we're looking at what's in the manure and then adding fertilizer to complement that and to complement what the crop needs. And so you can see when we add manure combined with the proper types and rates of fertilizers, we can see an increase in crop yields. So again, the overall goal here is to look at what we have at home first, look at what the crops need, and then try to balance that with purchased inputs if we need them. Okay. And a lot of this is based on really what you want to achieve on your farm. All right. So if you are happy with your yields, you're happy with the productivity of the field, you're happy with the quality that you're getting, then what you're doing or what we plan to add to that field will and should be in line with that. So if you're hoping or you're happy with achieving 2 tons of dry matter from a field per acre per year for hay, then we're going to fertilize for that. We're not going to put on enough fertilizer to grow 5 tons if you only realistically want to grow 2. Now, most people need to get more feed and better quality off of those fields. And so we're going to be looking at that with you to try to optimize, your needs and goals for the farm. So a lot of times, we're generally focused on yields, what's coming off those fields, and, quality, a lot of quality in regard to like forage digestibility, as an example, is driven by timing, like harvest timing, time of the year, sometimes, the species that are out in the field. But there are other aspects of quality and nutrition in your crops that can be modified or enhanced by proper fertilization. And so here's just an example again of some experiments that our team did with a farm actually in New York, where we were adding manure, or the farm was adding manure like they normally do. And then as part of the experiment, we added additional fertilizer, again, based on the soil test. And you can see the increase in micronutrients and macronutrients in that forage. So fertilizing to produce more nutrient density in your forages should be a goal for the farm. Okay. And again, when we fertilize the fields properly, so here's an example of an amended field. So it got the nutrients that it needed versus one that didn't. You can see the changes in relative forage quality. Of course, we always have to look at kind of the return on investment, right? What are you investing in those fields and what are you getting in return, whether it's yield or quality? And what is it costing? So these are all pieces that you have to think about as you're developing your plan. Your fields may have high requirements for nutrients, and you may not be able to afford to meet those. You may not have enough manure on the farm, or resources to buy outside nutrients, but knowing the consequences of that or the outcomes is also important. So putting your money where the investment is needed based on your goals. So you can also see, some of the return when we're feeding higher quality forages and we're getting more out of those forages. We can produce more milk, we can produce more meat. So again, you have to look at this more holistically. I hear a lot of times from farms, I can't afford to, which I don't disagree. I don't know everybody's financial situation, but also choosing not to maintain the overall productivity of the land just sort of digs a deeper hole over time. And those fields will become less thrifty and less thrifty over time. So these are all things to think about as you're looking at your soil tests and making your plan. Where do you want to put your investment? And the investment could also mean the manure that you have on your farm. Where should you be putting that to get the biggest bang for your resources? Another aspect, again, from an economic perspective, will be really looking at building up legumes on your farm. Because we know if we have legumes mixed in with grasses, we can obtain higher yields than just grass alone, or even grass that we're fertilizing, purchasing fertilizers and fertilizing. So adding in legumes to the mix can be very beneficial to yields, quality, and again, the bottom line. If we can fertilize grasses with legumes and maintain those, then likely we'll have to purchase less nitrogen fertilizer and also be able to extend the resources you have on your farm, use less manure on those fields, and be able to take the manure that you have and spread that out further. Okay, so these are all economic aspects and reasons to, again, write a nutrient management plan and dig into this a bit more. Here's just a little more data showing you dry matter yields from grass only versus grass mixed with clover. So we want to pay attention to these pieces so that we can help you sort of optimize yields and quality for the least amount of money. Environment, I mean, honestly, from a regulatory perspective, this is what it's all about. The reason that people are required to write plans in the state of Vermont all really revolves around environmental concerns, degradation primarily of water quality. We have a lot of impaired waterways in Vermont. And so, a response to that is have farms write these types of plans to make sure nutrients being added are not being lost to the environment. So part of writing this plan is to try to minimize these losses to surface water, groundwater, and to the air. And of course, we're talking a lot about greenhouse gas emissions these days. So recognizing all of those potential nutrient losses through planning and trying to minimize those. Again, while trying to feed our crops. So we don't want to take away from agricultural productivity. We just want to make sure that we're managing the nutrients so they go to ag productivity and not into the environment. All right. We do have some new, not that new, I guess it's been a number of years now, where we are looking at tile water quality and tile drainage. And so that is built into the NMP now. And you will see as you start to build fields, it will ask you if the field is tile drained. When we're talking about tile drainage, we're not talking about orphan tiles, we're talking about system tiled fields. So if you answer yes, I have tile in that field, that's the tile system that we want to know about for planning purposes. And what that does is it helps to calculate phosphorus loss risk. Okay, that's the only way it's used in the plan. And we'll talk more about that when we dig deeper into risk assessments. Public perception, public relations, all really good reasons to write a nutrient management plan, especially writing it on your own. Taking this class, you get a lot of information about things that you may not have otherwise learned before or known. You'll learn the intricacies of your plan and how it's built and why. And being able to communicate that with the public has become increasingly important. So, when somebody asks you, what are you doing to protect water quality? You can state that very clearly. I have a nutrient management plan. I calculate the potential risk for soil loss and nutrient loss. I'm doing X, Y, and Z to minimize these losses. So a nutrient management plan, again, is a tool and knowledge to help you communicate what you're doing to the general public. All right, and then lastly, but not least, of course, is regulation. And many of you in this class are regulated through various standards, I guess, or rules. So every farm in Vermont is required to follow the required agricultural practices, the RAPs. So regardless of shape, size, location, all farms need to follow the required agricultural practices. If you are a certified small farm operation or a CSFO, I'm assuming you know that. These rules have been in place for some time, but if you are a certified small farm, a medium farm, or a CAFO or LFO farm, a large farm, then you have to follow the RAPs, but you also have to write and follow and maintain a nutrient management plan that meets the NRCS 590 standard. Okay, so all farms have to follow the RAPs, even very, very small farms. But those farms classified as a certified small farm, a medium farm, or a large farm have an extra piece to follow, which is the development, implementation, and maintenance of a nutrient management plan that follows the 590 standard. And that's what we're going to be doing in this class, right? We're writing you a plan with you that follows this standard so that you meet state and federal requirements. Okay, so there is a wonderful, beautiful colored version of the RAPs. It's available online. I think it's also in your binder. It was in mine that's sitting on my desk. So if you're not familiar with these, they've been in place, as you can see, since 2016. So we're coming up on almost really a decade. It's a beautiful booklet, easy to read. Please go through them. We don't actually cover every RAP in this class. Not every RAP is a part of nutrient management planning. So I think it's important for everyone to go through these. Some of them we do, some of them we don't. We do follow the nutrient management 590 practice standard. There is a copy of this in your binder. I highly recommend reading it. It goes through all the components and requirements for building this plan. We are following it. You don't need to worry about that. But if you're interested and want some more background, please feel free to read it. It's in your binder. And it should stay in there as well. Okay, so a couple of components that I want to go through here is that we don't necessarily touch on in other parts of the class are setbacks and restrictions. And I'm not going to go over every one, but the ones that generally apply to this course are around buffers. So surface water protection and buffers. Okay. So it is a requirement through the 590 standard and the RAPs that there is a 25-foot perennial vegetated buffer from the top of bank along surface water. And here's a beautiful picture out of the RAPs that shows you that 25-foot perennial vegetated buffer that is a requirement for all farms along surface water. If you have a hay field, you sort of naturally have a buffer in that field, right? Within that buffer, you cannot spread manure, right? So even though it may be a part of your hay field, if you're spreading manure on your hay field, you have to have a 25-foot buffer from the top of bank along surface water where there is no manure application. Okay? You can harvest it. You can also actually add commercial fertilizer, but if you are going to do that, you need to soil test the buffer. Okay. Most people don't do that, but you are allowed to fertilize it if you're harvesting it based on a soil test taken from the buffer with commercial fertilizer only. All right. You also are required to have a 10-foot buffer along ditches and on both sides of the ditch. And this is shown in the picture here. All right. You also have to have a 100-foot buffer along surface water on a 10% average slope for any annual cropland. And these requirements have been in place again since 2016. So I'm assuming most people have these buffers in place, and they will show up in your plan in various places. So just wanted to highlight those again. For groundwater protection, you also cannot spread manure within 200 feet from a public well and 100 feet from a private well. Okay, so we'll go over that more later. All right, so the soil tests that you have in order to be valid to create a new plan, they cannot be any older than 2 years old. Hopefully most people have new soil tests. So they're, hot off the press. But if you have some older soil tests to create a new plan, they cannot be any older than 2 years. Once the plan is completed, you will need new soil tests every 3 years. Okay, so you have to maintain this plan. It has to be updated. And the requirement is that new soil tests are taken every 3 years. You also need yearly manure tests for each storage on your farm. Soil tests must use a modified Morgan's extractant. There are no other options. This is not negotiable. And so hopefully whatever soil tests you have used the modified Morgan's extractant. You'll need crop information to create the plan. You'll need soil information, crop rotations, the MEAT-T, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you'll need yield goals like we were talking about. Okay. We'll also need to know about the inputs on your farm, right? We'll need to know about the amendments that you have, the nutrient sources. We need to know how much manure is being produced, what types of manure, where it's being stored, to go along with the analysis. We'll also need to know the types of fertilizers that you'll be adding as well. We'll conduct risk assessments for every field on your farm by looking at the soil test levels, the phosphorus soil test levels. And then we'll use 2 tools, one called the phosphorus index, which will help us understand the potential for phosphorus loss from your fields. And then we'll also be looking at the nitrogen leaching index and the potential for nitrogen loss from those fields. At the very end of class, after we get through all of that data input and kind of data gathering, we'll put all the pieces together and we'll start to make field by field recommendations, right? So we'll use the manure information, the soil tests, and the management information that you've gathered through class to start developing field by field plans for fertility and management. Okay, so those are all the pieces that will go into the plan. The first requirements that you're going to be meeting in this first class, Lindsay already talked about one, doing the farm narrative or farm description through GoCrop. Okay, so that's number 3 on my list. But there's 2 other requirements that you're going to need to evaluate today and make sure that you have these pieces in place. And one is the required maps. So there's a series of maps that are required for the plan, and those will need to go in your binder. You don't make them. Hopefully, you've been working with somebody, land treatment planner, NRCS extension, that has created these maps for you. You will also need to have Russell 2 run on your farm. And what Russell 2 will do is give you a prediction of potential soil loss from your fields based on management. Okay? So again, this is used to make sure that we don't have too much erosion coming off of your fields. Because if we're losing soil, we're losing money, we're losing nutrients, and we could be harming the environment. So we need to look at this. Okay, so this will be our homework for this week. We're going to check the maps. We're going to make sure our soil loss is not too excessive. And then we're going to fill out the farm narrative through GoCrop. All right. So let's talk about the maps. Depending on who you're working with, people have their own style, right? There's people make maps in a lot of different ways. So what I'm showing you may look like what you have. It may look different. The important piece is that you have the map, okay, the type of map that I'm going to talk about, and that your fields that are going into the plan are represented on the map. Okay, so if you're missing a track or you're missing a field, you need to talk to the person that made the maps so that that gets added. All right, so watershed and proximity maps. So proximity maps just show where your farm and the fields and the tracks are located within your surroundings, okay? And the watershed map shows the watershed codes that your farm sits in or resides in. Some people put these together. Sometimes they're separate, but you need both, okay? You need a map that shows your proximity of your farm to your surroundings, and you need a map that shows the watersheds that your farm falls in, okay? They can be separate, they can be together, but these are a requirement. You also need these field maps. These have a lot of different names, but you will recognize these maps. If you work with FSA, a lot of people call these, oh, my FSA maps, right? What these maps show are your fields. They show the farm number down below. They show the tract number, and they show the individual field number. So this is farm 447, tract number 31. You can see that down below near the legend. And then above, it shows you the fields in that farm tract. And each one of those fields has a designated number. So we have number 7. It has an acreage, 50.2. And then it also says if it's highly erodible or not, right? So you will use the information from this map in your plan. You need to have FSA tract and field numbers designated in your nutrient management plan as well as whatever you call that field. Okay. You will need to use the FSA acres as well. If you need these maps modified, again, please talk to the person that produced your maps. You should have soil maps, right? So the soil map, again, shows your fields. You can see those same fields highlighted, and then you can see the soil type in those fields. And the soil type itself can be a 3-letter code or it can be numbers, right? These maps can look very different depending on who created them, but you need to have a soil map to represent each field that will be included in your plan, right? So far we have proximity map, watershed map, field map, soil map. Some people may have a frequently flooded map if you have frequently flooded fields. So most people won't have these. You should have a resource concern map in your plan. The resource concern map will include areas on the farm that, like, maybe a wetland, they may have a endangered species on it. It will show all the water on your farm. It will highlight the buffers that are required along fields. It may show, or it should show, wells on the farm. And in some cases, it may also show nutrient spreading setbacks, especially if there is a well on the farm. Okay, so a resource concern map. Some people will get a buffer and setback map. Not everybody. Those do need to be on the resource concern map, but sometimes people make separate maps to show those. But not everybody will get those again. Okay, a farm practice map. So if you're engaged in an NRCS program, you may receive a map that shows where various NRCS practices will be implemented or should be implemented. Okay, again, not everybody will get this map, really dependent on who your planner is and kind of what your goals are for being in the class. Manure stacking map. So if you're stacking manure, you'll likely have a map that shows where manure is stacked on the farm. Hopefully it meets NRCS and also RAP standards. Okay, so make sure you have the maps. Let's just go over the required maps, which are proximity, watershed, field map, soil map, and resource concerns. You may or may not have some of these other maps, depending on your individual situation for your farm location, and also the planner making the maps. So you should have the correct maps. What you really want to do is make sure all fields are represented, that you plan to include in the plan, and that the maps are accurate. If there is a buffer on the map, but there's no well there, you need to let your planner know. Okay, so the last thing we're going to cover today before we break for lunch and then also work on our homework for the remainder of the class is we're going to talk about tolerable soil loss and predicted soil loss from your farm and requirements. Okay, so one of the major concerns in Vermont is around erosion. Okay, the loss of soil from our fields to non-target areas. Okay, and if we're losing soil from our farm, we're losing investment. I hope you all realize that, right? You're paying mortgages on your farm, at least most of you are. You have a investment there. So the last thing I'm assuming that you would want is to be losing that precious topsoil off of your fields. Well, nobody else wants that either. When we lose soil from our fields and it makes its way into, places it shouldn't be, like a river or stream or a lake, even a ditch, there are nutrients attached to those soil particles. And those nutrients are unwanted in surface water. Okay. And the sediment too causes a lot of issues. So, our goal here is to reduce soil loss from your fields. Now, how do we know how much soil you're losing? Well, we don't, right? We're using a computer model to predict based on soil type, weather factors, and management. Okay, so we use those factors to predict how much soil is going to be lost from each individual field. It's a prediction. Okay, it's really the best tool we have, but we need to have something to gauge what potential soil loss is. So for your farm, your planner, land treatment planner, NRCS, maybe extension, they have worked with you, right, to collect management information. What are you doing on your fields? Right? They combine that again with soil type and slope and environmental factors, and they predict soil loss, okay, from each field on your farm. And your goal through nutrient management class is to minimize that loss. The regulatory requirement is that you lose less soil than the tolerable soil loss for the soil type in that field. So there is what we call a tolerable level for each soil type. And that essentially means that you don't lose too much soil that the soil can't replenish itself fast enough. Right? And I'm going to walk through that over the next few slides, hopefully, so you better understand what the heck I'm talking about here. Okay, so Russell 2, you'll hear this a lot. You'll see the printouts in your binder. Your homework is to make sure that your predicted soil loss does not exceed T for any given field on your farm. Okay, so T is what is tolerated. It is the tolerable soil loss for that soil type. Okay, so Russell 2 really is focused on kind of sheet erosion. Here's a picture of what I mean by sheet erosion. It's usually like not that visible. You'll have water moving across the field and with it soil particles. You can kind of see it a little bit kind of at the ends of the fields oftentimes. You'll see kind of maybe a plume of soil, but it's not always very visible in the field. But in most fields, we have some level of sheet erosion. And of course, the more exposed soil you have, in the lower quality soil you have, the more risk you have for sheet erosion. Rill erosion is when we start to see this concentrated flow of water down a little pathway here. And of course, if this continues over time, you may end up with what we call gully erosion. And, this is very extreme, of course, but we do have cases like this in Vermont. Russell 2 does not predict this, right? It's not looking at gully erosion. If you have gully erosion on your farm, you really should reach out to someone at NRCS or the state of Vermont to help you kind of rectify that situation. But mostly what we're thinking about here is sheet and some rill erosion as well. That's what we're really predicting. So these are just different examples of sheet and rill erosion on fields. We see a lot of this in Vermont. Some of it's, from the flooding events that we've had, the extreme weather that we've had, um, persistent rainfall. And so we really have to work hard to manage this in Vermont, because we do have so much precipitation. And now, we often get precipitation at, really high levels, pretty extreme events. All right. So I already talked about this. When we're predicting soil loss, we're looking at climate, soil type, topography, and then land use. How is that land being managed? All right. So what is T? Talked about this a few times. It's what we call the tolerable soil loss. And each soil type has a designated T value. Okay. And so here's a Rainham silt loam, 3 to 8% slopes. This is the soil fact sheet I mentioned before. And if you look over here, way to the right, you see erosion factors, and it says T for Rainham silt loam is 5. Okay, so what that means is, I got to get this right myself, a Rainham silt loam can tolerate a yield soil loss of 5 tons of soil per acre per year. Think about that. So this is the tolerable level. This is what you have to meet. So if you have a Rainham silt loam, your planner is going to run Russell 2. They're going to predict soil loss for your field. And if you have a Rainham silt loam and your soil loss predicted is 5 or less, then you're meeting the regulatory requirement. Of course, my advice to you is to lose a lot less than 5 tons of soil per acre per year. Okay. But that's what's tolerable for this soil type, meaning that it can regenerate fast enough to lose that much soil. All right, really has nothing to do. I'm not going to get into that, but each soil type is slightly different. This is a very productive agricultural soil. Now let's go to another soil type. Here's a Munson silt loam. If you look at the tolerable soil loss for this soil type, it's 2. All right. So if you're farming a Munson silt loam and your planner ran Russell 2s for your farm, the level you would have to meet is 2 tons soil loss per acre per year or less. Okay. So the tolerable level is based on the soil type for that field. So you can see how you need the soil maps. You need to know what the predominant soil is, or I guess the most risky soil in that field. Okay, what's the tolerable soil loss for that? And then what is your predicted value based on what you're doing? And does it meet T? Okay, what if it doesn't? Well, then we have to make some management changes because we can't change the slope and we can't change the weather. The only things we can change are what we have control over. Okay, so again, your homework is to take out your Russell 2 sheets. It should have the tolerable soil loss at the top, like what you're allowed to lose. It should list the fields and management, and if you're meeting T. Okay, so you just want to look through those sheets and make sure that you're meeting T. And if you're not, back to the drawing board. Here's just a couple of examples that I pulled from some plans, and they're actually you're in your binder, so you can go back and refer to these. And again, these printouts will look different depending on your farm and your planner. So here's owner name, Vermont Farm, tract number 782, field name 1. And it lists the soil type here. It's a Buckland loam. This must be up in the Northeast Kingdom. There's a lot of Buckland loams up there, 3 to 8% slope. Okay, the T for that soil is 3. Okay, so you need to meet T. So you cannot exceed 3 tons of soil loss per acre per year. Okay, so you look down below here and you can see this farm's current rotation, 5 years of corn, 5 years of hay, and then you see an alternative rotation, 3 years of corn, 6 years of hay. There's some details here around that rotation and how it's managed, tillage, number of cuttings, manure, etc. And then you have this conservation plan soil loss number. Okay? So you can see for the current rotation, the soil loss is at 4.3. It exceeds T. Not acceptable. Okay, the alternative rotation that was generated is 2.1 tons of soil loss. It meets T, right? So the rotation that you have will have a planned soil loss number, and that number needs to meet T. Again, if it doesn't, then you need to work with the planner to come up with a viable option, I would say, to minimize soil loss so that you meet the standard, you meet the regulations, right? Now, you will also receive, right, if you're in a rotation, so if you're in continuous hay, you'll just get one number. If you're in continuous corn and that meets T, you'll also have one number. But if you're in a rotation like this farm, 3 years corn, 6 years hay, you're going to receive soil loss numbers for each year in the rotation. Okay. So again, the regulatory requirement is that your rotation soil loss meets T. Not each year in the rotation has to meet T. Okay. The average of all those years needs to meet T. But you will receive each year's soil loss number. As you can see down below here, year 1 is 1.9 tons of soil loss. Year 2, 2.9. You will receive each year's soil loss. Those will be entered into your plan, and those will be used to predict the risk of phosphorus loss. Okay. But as far as the rotation goes, the average soil loss has to meet T. So what you're looking at today is if that's true. Okay. Here's just another example. This is a hay field on a Dutchess silt loam, tolerable soil loss 5. With hay fields, if they're permanent hay or just rotated, maybe or reseeded, maybe every 5 years, soil loss numbers generally are very, very low. Okay, so usually the soil loss numbers meet T if you're in hay or pasture. All right. Just one last consideration here is just making sure that if your current management exceeds T, that you are making some shifts, right, in management to meet T that are realistic for you, right? So here's just an example where T is 2. Okay, so they're allowed 2 tons of soil loss. What this farm normally does is 4 years of corn, 4 years of hay with fall plowing, some manure, and the soil loss is 3.43, okay, for the rotation. Here's the individual years. but the average is 3.4. Doesn't meet T. So this farm says, well, I'm just gonna go no-till then, right? And so down at the bottom, you can see the soil loss for no-till across the rotation is 0.734. Hardly anything. Okay. But are you really going to transition to no-till? Is that realistic? It looks good on paper, but if you're not going to put that actual practice into place, or that actual crop, or that actual, tillage scheme or cover crops, don't put it down on the paper because if you're regulated and the inspector shows up, they're going to be expecting to see no-till. Okay, they're going to be expecting to see a cover crop. So make sure the rotation and the practices that you commit to when you're doing this plan are realistic, and things that you're going to do, you're excited about, and you're going to achieve. Because for many of you, this plan does serve as a regulatory document. Okay, so please remember that. Not everybody, but the majority of folks here, this is a regulatory document. So you need to be careful that you're committing to things that you can actually do and want to do. All right. So let's just, I guess I don't have a wrap up slide. The wrap up slide is back to the homework. Okay. So I'll go back up, way back up here. Sorry. There we go. So the homework for this week is pretty easy. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to get more and more complicated as we, get further into the class. So check the maps, make sure every field that's in the plan is represented on the map. Make sure the maps are correct, okay? Again, if there's a well on the map, but there's not actually a well, then you want to make sure that gets confirmed and removed, just as an example. Make sure that your predicted soil loss for each field on your farm, okay, meets T for that field soil series type, okay? And get into GoCrop and fill out the plan narrative, I think it's called, for the farm description, okay? Play around in there a little bit and start to get used to it, because next week we'll have a lot more homework. All right, so that's it for this week. We're going to be breaking for lunch, and then in your classroom or individually, you'll be hopefully getting through the first bit of homework. You'll have plenty of time to get through this. Right.
Okay, and this is Susan. I just sent a thing on chat. I'm gonna open up 5 breakout rooms. So if you're somebody that wants to work with your farmer, you both can assign yourself to the room. You can move in and out of the rooms yourself. So I'll go ahead and create those 5 now. And I'm also gonna hit stop recording.
Great. Thanks. Great, Susan. Appreciate it. And have a great lunch, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you next week.